The room went dead silent as I looked my stepmother directly in the eyes. She had no idea what was about to hit her. My heart pounded in my chest, fueled by years of betrayal and anger. "You really thought you could waltz back into my life after what you did?" I said, my voice cold, laced with an intensity that even surprised me. She blinked, her fake smile faltering. My brother, standing beside her, looked equally confused and slightly uneasy. They had returned from abroad just 2 days ago, strutting back into town like they owned the place. But they didn't know I was ready. They didn't know I had been planning this moment for years. It all started when my father passed away unexpectedly. I was devastated, left to pick up the pieces while my stepmother, Vanessa, pretended to grieve. She married my father late in his life, and while I tried to accept her, something about her never felt right. My instincts told me she wasn't the saint she pretended to be. Just weeks after the funeral, Vanessa moved swiftly, convincing me to hand over control of my father's business and savings. "I'll manage everything until you're ready," she had said, her voice dripping with faux sincerity. I was barely 21, naive and grieving, so I believed her. I trusted her. Months later, I discovered the truth in the most brutal way. Vanessa had emptied the accounts. All of it, $370,000, was gone. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. Instead, she smirked and said, "You'll thank me someday. You're too young to handle this kind of responsibility." I wanted to scream, but before I could take any action, she fled the country. My brother, Lucas, who had always been her favorite, went with her. They left me with nothing but the crushing weight of betrayal and debts I didn't even know existed. For years, I lived hand to mouth, working multiple jobs to keep myself afloat. The anger never subsided, but it fueled me. Every day I worked toward one goal: revenge. I studied everything I could about the legal system, tracking every move they made from afar. They thought they were untouchable, but they were wrong. 5 years later, they returned. I spotted them at a local cafe, laughing like they hadn't destroyed my life. Vanessa was draped in designer clothes, her face smug and confident. Lucas, now in his late 20s, looked at ease, as if he'd never known hardship. Seeing them ignited a fire in me. It was time to act. I didn't approach them immediately. Instead, I began gathering evidence. I had spent years collecting everything I could: bank statements, fraudulent transactions, and even private investigator reports. With a little help from a friend in law enforcement, I built a case that would make them pay for everything they'd stolen. When I finally approached them, it was in the most public way possible. I walked into the cafe where they were laughing and enjoying themselves. "Vanessa, Lucas," I said, my voice cutting through their laughter like a knife. They turned, their smiles fading. "What are you doing here?" Vanessa asked, her tone icy. "Oh, just making sure you're comfortable before everything falls apart," I said, sliding a thick file onto their table. Inside the file was everything: proof of their theft, their offshore accounts, and the fraudulent paperwork Vanessa had signed. She went pale as she flipped through the pages. This isn't real," she stammered. "Oh, it's very real," I said, "and I've already handed copies to the authorities." Vanessa's composure shattered as she realized the gravity of the situation. "You have no idea what you're doing," she hissed. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," I replied. "And this is just the beginning." Lucas tried to defend her, but even he couldn't deny the evidence. "You told me this was all legal," he shouted at her, his voice breaking. Vanessa's betrayal extended even to her own son, and it was clear he hadn't been fully aware of her schemes. I filed lawsuits against them, freezing their accounts and ensuring they couldn't flee again. The community, once blind to Vanessa's charm, now saw her for who she truly was. The court cases dragged on, but I was relentless, determined to see justice served. Months later, Vanessa and Lucas faced the consequences of their actions. Their assets were seized, and Vanessa was sentenced to prison for fraud and embezzlement. Lucas, while not entirely innocent, struck a deal to avoid jail time, but his reputation was destroyed. As I watched Vanessa being led away in handcuffs, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my life and proving that no one could break me. Even after the court proceedings began, the weight of what had happened still clung to me. The courtroom became a battlefield of lies, truths, and the rawest emotions I'd ever experienced. Vanessa hired high-powered attorneys to twist the narrative, painting herself as a victim of mismanagement rather than a cunning thief. I had to sit there, stone-faced, as her lawyers tried to rewrite history. "She took you in as her own," one of them said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is nothing more than a misunderstanding between family members." Family members? The words stabbed deeper than I expected. Family didn't steal your future and flee the country. Family didn't turn your life into ashes. But I didn't let it show. I had prepared too long, worked too hard, to let their manipulation rattle me. My lawyer, Amanda, a firebrand who shared my passion for justice, tore apart their defense, brick by brick. Every lie they spun, we countered with hard, undeniable evidence. Outside the courtroom, the reality of my loneliness hit me hard. My friends had long since drifted away. Relationships were non-existent. I hadn't allowed myself the luxury of love or companionship. Revenge had consumed me, and now, as the walls closed in on Vanessa and Lucas, I began to question what would be left of me when it was all over. But those moments of doubt didn't last long. Every time I thought about the nights I spent in a cold, empty apartment while they lived lavishly abroad, I felt my resolve strengthen. They deserved everything coming to them. One afternoon, as I was leaving the courthouse, Lucas approached me. His once confident demeanor was gone, replaced by desperation. "Please, we need to talk," he said, his voice shaking. I didn't know what she was doing. I swear, I stared at him, my emotions conflicted. Lucas had always been her puppet, but was he truly innocent? "You knew enough," I replied coldly. "You could have stopped her, but you didn't." I thought she was protecting us," he stammered. "She told me Dad's business was failing, that she was saving the family. I didn't know about the accounts, the money." I wanted to believe him, but the scars he'd left on my life were too deep. "You made your choices," I said, walking away. During the trial, shocking revelations came to light. Vanessa hadn't just stolen from me. She'd been running scams for years, using my father's name to secure loans and investments, all while funneling the money into offshore accounts. Witness after witness took the stand, each one painting a darker picture of her deceit. Former business partners, family friends, even people she claimed to have helped, all of them testified against her. "She's a master manipulator," one of them said. "She makes you believe she's your savior while she's stabbing you in the back." As the trial progressed, Lucas began to unravel. He stopped showing up in designer clothes, his confident facade replaced by guilt and shame. One day, he approached me again, this time with tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know how much she hurt you." For the first time, I saw a glimpse of the brother I once knew, the one who used to protect me before Vanessa poisoned his mind. "It's too late for apologies," I said, though my voice softened. "But if you really mean it, you'll make it right." Lucas's turning point wasn't just words. Days later, he handed over a USB drive filled with incriminating evidence against Vanessa. Emails, transaction records, and even voice recordings of her plotting to siphon money from my father's company. "I found these a while back," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I was too scared to do anything then, but maybe it's not too late." His actions, while overdue, were pivotal. The recordings were the final nail in Vanessa's coffin. The day Vanessa was sentenced felt surreal. The courtroom was packed, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. When the judge handed down her sentence, 15 years for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, a murmur ran through the room. Vanessa's face remained stoic, but I saw the cracks in her armor. For the first time, she wasn't in control, and it terrified her. As she was led away in handcuffs, she turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "I won't." With Vanessa out of the picture, I began the slow process of rebuilding my life. The court awarded me restitution from her seized assets, enough to pay off my debts and start over. But the money wasn't what mattered most. For the first time in years, I felt free. Lucas, too, began to rebuild. He cut ties with Vanessa completely, moving to a small town to start fresh. We weren't close. Too much had happened. But we began to talk again, slowly repairing the bond Vanessa had destroyed. Even as life moved on, the scars of Vanessa's betrayal remained. I often wondered if my father had seen through her lies before he passed or if he had truly believed in her. Either way, her actions had left a mark that would never fully heal. Life after Vanessa's sentencing felt like stepping into a new world, but the shadows of the past clung to me. Every corner of my home reminded me of what I'd lost. The photo albums, the furniture my father had chosen, even the scent of the old wooden floors. It all felt like echoes of a life that had been stolen. One evening, I sat by the fireplace with a box of my father's belongings. Among the items was a letter he'd written but never sent. It was addressed to Vanessa. My heart pounded as I opened it, the words like a portal to his thoughts. Vanessa, I've always trusted you with everything, but lately, I've seen sides of you I can't ignore. If you're reading this, it means I wasn't strong enough to confront you directly. I hope you choose love over ambition. For Lucas and for my daughter, they deserve better. Tears streamed down my face. My father had seen her for who she truly was, but he'd chosen to believe in her better nature. It broke me to realize that trust was his final mistake. Lucas reached out to me regularly now. At first, I was hesitant, unsure if I could ever fully trust him again. But his actions spoke louder than his words. He sold the luxury car Vanessa had gifted him years ago and donated the money to a local shelter. He started working a modest job as a teacher, mentoring troubled teens. A far cry from the entitled, self-absorbed brother I once knew. One evening, we met for coffee at a small diner. He seemed different, humbled, worn down by guilt, but also genuine. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "But I want you to know I'm trying. For Dad. And for you." For the first time in years, I saw the brother I used to look up to. "It's not about forgiveness, Lucas," I replied. "It's about what you do moving forward." Rebuilding my life meant learning to trust again. But it wasn't easy. I found myself second-guessing everyone's intentions, questioning even the simplest acts of kindness. It was exhausting. Therapy helped, but the wounds Vanessa left were deep. One night, I found myself staring at a bank statement, the numbers blurring as memories of betrayal flooded back. My therapist's words echoed in my mind. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live with the scars. I made a decision that night. I wouldn't let Vanessa's actions define me. I would move forward no matter how hard it was. Just when I thought the chapter was closed, I received a letter from Vanessa. It arrived unexpectedly, its tone dripping with manipulation. "I hope you're happy with yourself. You've ruined everything. Lucas will never forgive you, and neither will I. You'll always be alone, clinging to your petty revenge." Her words stung, but they also revealed her desperation. She wasn't apologizing. She was lashing out, trying to regain control even from behind bars. I didn't respond. Instead, I burned the letter, watching the ashes drift away like the hold she once had over me. With Vanessa's influence gone, I finally felt free to pursue dreams I had buried for years. I enrolled in business school, determined to honor my father's legacy by rebuilding the company Vanessa had destroyed. It wasn't just about success. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above the ashes. Lucas surprised me by offering to help. "I know I don't deserve it," he said, "but I want to make things right." Reluctantly, I agreed. Together, we began piecing the company back together, learning to trust each other in the process. Months turned into years, and life began to stabilize. The business thrived, not because of flashy marketing or underhanded deals, but because we built it on integrity, something Vanessa had never understood. Lucas became my strongest ally, and while the wounds of the past never fully healed, our bond grew stronger with time. We often talked about Dad, sharing memories that reminded us of the man who had inspired us to keep going. I think he'd be proud of us, Lucas said one day, his voice thick with emotion. I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. Yeah, I think he would. The story didn't end with revenge. It ended with growth. Vanessa's betrayal taught me lessons I never wanted to learn, but they made me stronger. The scars she left behind became a testament to my resilience. As I stood in the office of the company I had rebuilt, looking out over the city, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The journey had been brutal, filled with pain and loss, but it had also been transformative. Vanessa had tried to break me, but in the end, she only made me unbreakable.